Morning, 7th grade. This is Mr. Doyle here, just to kind of get us started off this week with what we're going to be covering in our first week of SCH at Home. So to start us off, we're going to do a little bit of a review of the immune system and pathogens. You guys are going to take a little quiz on this, more of a test on this on Thursday. Start that on Thursday this week, before we move on to our next unit. So I wanted to take a little bit of time and kind of go over your notes. So hopefully you brought your notes home, but if you did not bring your notes home, we've posted a copy of the notes in a PDF form that you can check out. So please make sure you download that so you can review your notes in preparation for your test on this on Thursday. So the first thing that we covered were pathogens. All right. And if you remember, we broke pathogens down into a few different groups. Okay, the main ones that we spent a lot of time studying were viruses and bacteria, but also things like fungus, protists, parasites, and proteins. These can all be different types of pathogens. A pathogen is an agent that causes a disease. Okay, usually some sort of living microorganism. It produces an infection. Things like poison, things like smoking, many carcinogens. Those things are not pathogens. Okay, they can make you sick, but they're not living things. Okay, or they're not semi-living things. Okay, a virus is sort of living, but sort of not. All right, things like poison and smoking are just purely chemicals that harm your body. So those things are not considered pathogens. All right, I highly recommend you review this chart here, as it has a lot of information. Just a quick summary of the different types of pathogens, as well as a bunch of different examples. All right. First pathogen that we talked about is a virus. Okay, so viruses sort of straddle this line between living and non-living. All right, a virus can't reproduce on its own, which is why we consider it to be non-living. But it does move. It does have DNA and RNA, which it uses to reproduce. So it sort of straddles that line. Viruses are incredibly, incredibly small, 10,000 times smaller than a bacteria. Okay. And like we said, they need a host in order to spread and multiply. Okay, this is an influenza virus right here. And the reason why it needs a host in order to spread and multiply is because viruses use the host cell's own mechanisms to replicate / reproduce. All right, so a virus will land on a cell. It will inject its DNA or RNA into the cell. And then it will cause the cell's own structures to begin making copies of the virus for it. The virus will then assemble itself inside the cell, slowly killing the cell. As more and more viruses are created, the cell functions cease to work, and eventually the cell will burst open, releasing many, many more viruses into the organism. Okay, and then those viruses will all go land on more cells and kind of continue the process. All right. So the cell actually kind of convinces the virus actually kind of convinces the cell that the RNA and DNA of the virus is the correct instructions to follow, and so the cell begins to, like the ribosomes in the cell, begin to follow the instructions of the virus as opposed to following the instructions of the organism's actual DNA. Okay. There are lots and lots and lots of viruses on Earth, lots of different types. All right, obviously, we're dealing with one right now, and that's why we're all doing this at home. Okay. The next topic that we covered are bacteria. Okay, so bacteria are found all over the Earth. They can be found inside your stomach. Okay, there's groups of bacteria that are helpful. They help you digest food. There's bacteria on your skin that help prevent you from getting sick. They can attack the other bacteria. But then there are obviously certain types of bacteria that are pathogens. Something like E. coli that can be harmful or tuberculosis that can be harmful to you. Okay, there are three main types of bacteria: bacilli, colchi, and spirilla. All right, bacilli are sort of rod-shaped. Spirilla are like very thin. I think they look like spaghetti, and that's how I remember it. Spirilla and spaghetti. And then colchi are circular. Okay. Famously, Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin. Penicillin is the primary way that we treat bacterial infections. Okay, any medicine that you get that ends in "cillin" is sort of a derivative of Alexander Fleming's original discovery. Penicillin is actually a type of fungus that he accidentally discovered in a lab, and he realized that it was kind of creating this kill zone, this zone of inhibition here, okay, where the bacteria wouldn't grow near the fungus because the penicillin was killing the bacteria. As we talked about in class, antibiotics now are so widely used that there's concern about bacteria becoming more resistant to them and immune to them as the bacteria evolves over time. So the doctors are taking measures to kind of always find new types of antibiotics and are, trying to only use them as frequently as absolutely needed. Okay. And this kind of just goes over what we just talked about: overprescribing, self-medicating, taking antibiotics when they're not needed, taking the incorrect antibiotic, not finishing all of the antibiotic. These are all ways that antibiotics or that bacteria can become resistant to antibiotics. Okay. Next up, we talked about funguses. Okay, funguses like to grow in dark, moist areas. Okay, for instance, your feet. Okay, so if you know someone that's ever had athlete's foot, all right, that would be an example of a fungus. All right, and they can range from being mildly annoying, like athlete's foot, okay, to life-threatening, like meningitis. Fungus, like we talked about, they are complex, multi-celled living things. So everything else we talked about so far is either not even at the cellular level for a virus, a bacteria, which is single-celled. Funguses are multicellular. They're eukaryotes. Okay, they have a nucleus for their inside the cell, so they're definitely more complex than some of the other ones that we've talked about so far in terms of like their structures. All right. Next up are protists, which are unicellular eukaryotes. Okay, they have a nucleus again. These include things like malaria, which is a disease that can be found primarily in tropical areas, but it kills a lot of people every year. It's a very dangerous disease. Protists, can get nutrition through either photosynthesis or by engulfing food and eating food, essentially. So they can either, some of them do photosynthesis in order to reproduce, and some of them will just eat food. Okay, they primarily live in water all over the world. So they live in water all across the world. Every continent there's going to be some type of protist, and like damp or moist soil. Okay. There are 4 groups of protists. There's flagellum. They have flagellates, and what that is this big tail here. Okay, and that tail kind of whips around like a propeller for like an engine, or like a plane engine or a boat propeller, and it kind of pushes them through the water. Amoeba, we watched some videos on amoebas. They kind of throw out their pseudopod and kind of drag themselves along by kind of changing shape. Ciliates have these little hairs on the side of them that they swim back and forth in order to move. And then sporozoa, these ones don't move very much. They're just kind of carried along by the current or carried along by whatever it is that they are in. Okay? And then finally, our last type of pathogen that we talked about are parasites. Okay, parasites tend to be complex living organisms. Okay, so many of the parasites that are shown here, these are animals. Okay, they're relatively small animals compared to a human, but they are all considered animals. They are complex eukaryotes. They get their food and they get their energy by eating other living things. Okay, they breathe oxygen in many cases. So these are all parasites. Okay, and these guys are all different types of complex living things. They live on a host cell or a host organism, and they get their energy and their food by stealing nutrition from the host. Okay, they want to kind of walk. Most parasites want to walk this line of not eating too much that the host stays alive, but getting enough that like they're fully satisfied. But usually, eventually, if there's enough parasites on a host, it will kill the host organism. Okay. So that's it for pathogens. We're going to move on in a second to talking about how your immune system protects against that. Okay? All right, so how do we prevent against all of those scary pathogens that we just talked about? Well, like we talked about, there's a lot of scary stuff out there, right? There's a teaspoon of soil can generally contain about 1 billion bacteria. Okay, now, like I said when we talked about the bacteria, some of these are really important. Okay, so some of these bacteria help make the soil fertile, and without them, we wouldn't be able to grow plants. Some of them are in your stomach, and they help you digest food, but not all of them are good. Obviously, some of them are bad. So things like tetanus, botulism, anthrax, these are all bacteria that will harm you or hurt you. Okay. Pathogens can be transmitted in many different ways: food and drink, spit, through the air in some cases, in a whole lot of different ways, depending on the type of pathogen. Okay. And the way that the pathogen is transmitted is called the vector. So if it's transmitted through spit, then the spit would be the vector. If it's transmitted through the air, then the air would be the vector. If it's transmitted through food, then food is the vector. Okay. Most people pick up pathogens from other people. Okay. So most of the time, you're going to catch a pathogen getting it from another person. So sneezes, coughing, incidental contact. This is how most pathogens are passed, and this is why we are socially isolating right now. Right. So, most cases of the coronavirus have been passed from one person to another, from being in close proximity to someone that has it, whether or not they're showing symptoms. Occasionally, the coronavirus can be left on surfaces, and then if somebody touches that surface, it can pass that way as well, but it's definitely much more common for it to be passed between people. Okay? Just some fun facts about sneezing here. Okay? So go ahead and read those over. Not super relevant. All right. And like we said, the way that a pathogen is passed is called the vector. So some pathogens are carried by other animals. For instance, Lyme disease, okay, or spotted fever is carried by mosquitoes. Okay. It's carried by ticks. Mosquitoes carry Zika and malaria. Okay. The Black Plague was carried by fleas on rats. So, a lot of times if somebody gets bitten by an insect, that can lead to some sort of disease. Because if the insect bites someone that has the disease and then bites a new person, then that new person will also be transmitted the disease. Okay. Luckily, we have lots of ways to kind of prevent pathogens from getting into our body. So we have skin. You are covered in skin, hopefully still. Okay. Your skin is there to protect you. All right. You only have a few openings in your skin, as long as you don't have a bunch of cuts all over yourself. Right. Those openings are primarily on your face. So we have lots of ways. So it's hard for the bacteria to get inside. Your stomach, if it does get past your skin, okay, your nose has mucus as well as your mouth has mucus that can hopefully destroy or kill the bacteria or the pathogen that wants to get inside. So hopefully, if it gets there and it goes up your nose, hopefully it gets trapped in your nose, inside the mucus in your nose, or you can sneeze it out. Okay, same thing if it gets in your mouth. If it gets past that, in your stomach, okay, you have your stomach lining, which is a thick lining. You have acid produced in your stomach that can hopefully destroy any bacteria before it can get into your digestive system any further. And if it goes to your lungs, you have cilia, okay, these small little hairs in your lungs that try to kind of wrap up and grab the pathogen. So you have these kind of first line, these barrier defenses that hopefully prevent you from getting any diseases. All right. If a pathogen does enter the body, the inflammatory response is triggered first. So the inflammatory response is exactly what it sounds like. It's inflammation. So when you first start feeling sick, you might get a fever, you might feel swollen, feel a little bit achy. All of those are your own body's responses to the bacteria or to the pathogen. Okay, your body will increase its temperature, it'll increase blood flow, and it'll allow more white blood cells to get to an area, all in an effort to kind of kill or destroy the pathogen. And then these white blood cells, as you can see in this little picture here, this little diagram, okay, they'll find the bacteria, they'll use endocytosis, kind of swallow it up, and then they will use their lysosomes to destroy it. White blood cells tend to have lots of lysosomes in order to help them destroy bacteria and other pathogens. Okay, so that's our initial response, is the inflammatory response. If that doesn't work, okay, and there's enough pathogens, then the body will trigger the immune response. So if the initial response, the inflammatory response doesn't work, then your immune response gets triggered. And this is sort of where the specialized cells become, right? So the initial white blood cells are sort of like your basic, go out, just attack it and try to destroy it system, okay? Well, if that doesn't work and we need something more specialized, then your body's going to get involved, your T cells and your B cells. So T cells' job is to recognize the pathogen and tag it, okay? So the T cells will go around and they will recognize and tag the pathogen. So they will go ahead and they will recognize the pathogen's antibody, okay? Or sorry, antigen. They will recognize the pathogen's antigen, okay? And they will let the B cells know what type of antigen it is, okay? And the T cells will go around and they will start tagging the pathogen, okay? And the B cells then go ahead and they will create antibodies based on the type of pathogen it is by studying the antigen of that pathogen, okay? So the B cells will figure out what type of antibodies to use, and then they will create the right type of antibodies to kind of clump all of these pathogens together. So they all get stuck together, okay, and get disabled so that they can no longer enter your cells. So by creating these antibodies that cling to that cling to the antigens of the pathogen, they get stuck together. They can no longer enter the cells, and then the white blood cells can come by and destroy them. Okay. Now, the good thing is that these antigens and these T and B cells, once they figure it out, they remember how to fight it off. And this is how a vaccine works. Okay? So a vaccine tricks the immune system into thinking that it's been infected by some type of pathogen. So it tricks your immune system by either giving a destroyed or weakened version of the illness or some sort of chemical thing that looks very similar chemically to the pathogen. So it then injects it into the person, and your body fights it off. Your body creates T and B cells and antibodies that will help it destroy this pathogen. But this pathogen, when it's injected as a vaccine, is not harmful to you. All right? But then once your body has these antibodies and knows how to fight it, your body is prepared for if there's ever an actual attack by this bacteria or by this pathogen. So if your body ever actually gets attacked by the pathogen, it will be able to fight off whatever it is because it knows it and it knows how to fight it off because of the vaccine. All right, so that's it for a review of the immune system and pathogens. If you have any questions, please email your teacher, okay, myself, Ms. Crump, or Ms. Garbase, okay, or post on Google Classroom. And we'd be happy to address your questions. The next thing for you guys all to do, okay, is you are going to work on a little worksheet here. That's the answer key. That looks like this. So you're going to fill out information about the different types of diseases, and then you're going to answer these questions. We have provided you with an answer key. We do ask that you try to answer it all on your own first before referencing our answer key. Okay, please remember your academic honesty pledges from earlier in the year. And then if you need to, obviously we do provide the answer key and the review as a way for you to check your answers. But try to answer it by yourself as much as possible. All right, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on Thursday. Thank you. Bye.